Good morning, everyone. This is Joe Cody. I'm the founder of Fertility. I'm an IVF dad and a patient advocate. And here in a few minutes, we'll be having a discussion on egg freezing. But I just wanted to take the time to introduce myself and some of the work that Fertility does until we're able to have our guest join us. For those that are undergoing the egg freezing process or those that are about to begin, it can be completely overwhelming for people. And at Fertility, our mission is to really empower patients with the information they need so they can make informed decisions. And part of that informed decision process is understanding what goes into the egg freezing or IVF process. Egg freezing isn't a guarantee that you'll have kids in the future, but it's hoping to bank on that success and increase your odds of success in a little bit. So, really looking forward to this discussion, talking about all the things that people that take into account when they're deciding to freeze their eggs, trying to see what they are thinking about and everything else. And so once we're able to join, we'll be able to get started. We'll see here if Constance is able to ask to join. I believe that will be the... All right. See if this is working. Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I wanted to thank you again, and to everyone else who is watching or will be watching this recording later. Do a really quick introduction of myself and Fertility, but then really this is an informal discussion. You telling your story, everything that goes into the egg freezing process. And at Fertility, we really want to be able to empower patients so they have a better understanding of the processes that go into egg freezing, IVF, everything else, and truly understand what they're getting into when they make these decisions to be able to do this type of stuff. And so having these type of patient stories are incredibly important to us as an organization. So I really thank you for sharing your story. And if you can give just a little bit of background information to people, and then just a few questions, we'll kind of discuss your own journey.
Yeah, I went through egg freezing, I think about 2 years ago, when I was 35, and I went through two very large national clinics. I'm based in Colorado, and I kind of started that journey with very little information about, kind of what I was getting into, and started out with just some friends going to get AMH blood testing and for free at a clinic, and then went from there and kind of got more and more information on what those next steps could look like, because I um, wasn't ready to have kids, and I wanted to learn a little more about the process because some peers I in my group were going through the same thing. Um, and, and yeah, I went to one clinic um, and did the tests, and um, I really liked their platform, but ultimately I didn't end up getting my eggs frozen at that clinic just because of, I don't know, just not clicking with the providers there, and maybe just not feeling ready, and wanting a little more information about what else was out there. And so then I moved on to another big clinic, and that was one that I knew some friends had gone to. And it was a big clinic that was very outcomes driven. So I figured that that was probably a good um, summary of somewhere I wanted to go. And it was very overwhelming. It's already an invasive procedure, and it's um, you know it's you're already kind of in a fragile state just because you start learning a lot about your body, maybe that things you didn't really know, which is kind of frightening, to learn things later in life about your body, what it can and cannot do. And um, I think that that puts you in a really vulnerable state. So um, that was something I didn't really know going in, just how vulnerable I would be feeling. And I think um, the process was overwhelming. The amount of information that is uh, communicated to you is is overwhelming. So I think it just took a while to kind of process all the things that they were telling me, and the way it was set up was that I don't know, you get all this blood work done, you get your AMH and a number of other blood tests and get your follicle count, and then you go in and you speak with the doctor one on one, and it's just very definitive, so it can be scary. And uh, but then after that, I was sent to talk about the cost, and I don't know, I would rather have been sent to maybe talk about the information more, because I wasn't ready to talk about the cost. I was just mentally not in a state where I felt ready to do that. And then I went home and I, kind of largely lost touch with the physician that I was working with. So I didn't really get a whole lot of FaceTime with her, and there were a number of different people that I spoke with down the line. Um, it wasn't the same person, and there was not an application that they were using when I first went there. So all of the information that I was getting was on this weird portal, and it wasn't very clear. So, even if I wanted to know what my blood work showed, the blood work wasn't there, and the ultrasounds that I was getting were on there, but it was just challenging to kind of understand what I was looking at on the way they had it. So I think it's just, uh, at a bigger clinic, at least this was just my experience. I felt more like a number, and I didn't really feel like as much as valued as a patient in the whole experience.
Yeah, we hear that a lot from patients as they go through this process. And I know as someone who went through IVF with my wife, at a large clinic too, it's definitely a feeling that we felt, which is one of the reasons why, we founded Grain Fertility. And one of the things I'm interested in kind of learning a little bit more, you talk about this overwhelming nature of the process. You have so much information given to you, especially things that you didn't necessarily know about your own body, and you feel kind of not betrayed, but there's something that goes into it that there's shame behind all this stuff, and there's these stigmas that are associated, unfortunately, with this. But you talked about the lack of FaceTime with the doctors and multiple people you were talking to at the clinic. Were you relying on other people? You talked about friends who had gone through this before. Were they providing emotional support, kind of helping guide? Like, how were you actually coping with this process? Or did you really feel you were completely alone throughout this process and had to manage all of this on your own?
Yeah, I did. I did reach out to friends who had gone through the
Mm-hmm.
process at the same exact clinic, actually, and Um, and one or two of them also had similar experiences, and um, I think that it's kind of accepted as the standard of care. Like, oh, they're going to scare you. Oh, they're going to say these definitive things that make you feel scared and maybe ashamed. And like that was something that I was communicated was like, oh, they're gonna scare you, and I was like, that I don't think that that needs to be how it goes. Um, and so I was talking with peers, I was talking with friends who had like conceived naturally, um, and I also tried to go through some online support groups
Mm-hmm.
that I found, but then they didn't. I asked them and they said they had some support, like in-person support in online groups. I never actually went to them, but I just found my own on Facebook
Yeah.
by, search
Yeah.
terms. So it's kind of a mixture of peers and online.
When you were going through this process, you kind of talked about the information that you were given is not necessarily stuff you knew. How much did you know about the process, and how well do you think did the clinics plural that you went to really do a good job of explaining kind of what the process entails, not just the physical components of it, but some of the emotional or other things that go into this process, because we know that infertility in general, or egg freezing, or other types of fertility preservation impact us in much different ways than just you're pumped full of hormones, you have to do shots, you have retrievals, those type of things, or all these other elements we have to do. So how did they do a job of kind of preparing you for that? And if not, are there things you wish they would have done that you didn't know necessarily going into the process?
I they gave me a USB drive uh, with definitions and information, which in some ways I understand because it's a whole lot of information, and it's like, okay, go home and digest this at the pace that you feel comfortable. And I knew very little about how it went. Like I don't think I realized, I knew about the shots, giving yourself shots, but I didn't realize it was like you're going to the clinic for ultrasounds several times a week. And um and ultimately the medications did make me feel, very emotional. So, and I don't know if that was communicated well. I mean, I guess it's maybe assumed because they're hormones, and your own body to a certain extent. But yeah, I was definitely not feeling great when I was on them, and um, they they gave me, these summary overviews of the process, but I don't know if because you're getting all this information, you are necessarily processing it in a helpful way. So I wish that there was like somebody that I could have just talked to in person for a little bit. Um, um, and been helpful. Um, yeah, if I had more time with my physician, more like a more personalized experience and a little more room for hope, and more positivity. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's important. I think it's things that we hear a lot from patients who are using grain fertility services, where we have our patient empowerment coaches meeting with people regularly through their egg freezing journey, through IVF, or other types of assisted reproductive technologies, that, these clinics try their best to be able to do
Hmm.
stuff, but patients have so many questions. It's really hard to internalize all this information. And we often hear that people are kind of talking beyond one another, where the doctor or clinical staff are providing information to patients, but because it's so overwhelming, you may not internalize it, and you may
Hmm.
not actually understand the implications that it has on you, both short term, long term. How are you balancing all these components of your life while still trying to pursue these goals?
Hmm.
So, having gone through this now, what are things that you think people who are considering utilizing egg freezing as a way to, increase their chances of having children in the future when they're ready, or, other things align? What are things that you would recommend to them as they consider that process, so they can become more informed patients, so they can become, better advocates for their own care?
I would recommend really understanding the whole process, and that could be, educating yourself, or it could be talking to a peer, or if you're, whatever clinic you choose, like really try to sit down with the information, and don't be scared to, keep asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, understanding the cost, and and maybe the outcomes too. Ultimately, I think understanding what each of, what the blood work means, and what it doesn't mean. And that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and that's one of the things that we are hoping to be able to achieve with Grain Fertility and be able to provide that additional context. So patients like yourself can understand what all this means in the context of your own individual health and journey, and having that type of support as you go through this process, because we know the overwhelming nature of egg freezing and other types of assisted reproductive technology can be a lot for a person to handle. And there's so many implications on your short-term and long-term well-being and health that, all of that needs to be considered as you go through that process. So I know we're coming up on time, but I just wanted to offer any words of advice or anything else to people who are considering doing egg freezing, those who have, resources that you found helpful, anything else that you think, are the best ways to be able to make people, as empowered as they can be as they go through that process.
Yeah, I would say, find your support groups and educate yourself, and yeah, and really understand what you're doing and getting into. But also, I'm trying to say that I'm still glad that I went through the experience and I was able to do it, and you know, keep room for hope, keep room for positivity, and and yeah, I think and really, and I guess really
May have lost you at that very last point.
last thing I said was make sure this is research the clinic that you're using, and um, maybe compare and contrast a few and ask your friends what they thought of their experience at so and so clinic.
No, I think that's really helpful. And again, I really appreciate you and others who tell your stories, because I think that makes the process easier for others, and reaching people where they are on social media and having this type of awareness is incredibly important for anyone who is considering utilizing egg freezing, whether it's just because they're not the right time in their life to have children, or they have to do fertility preservation due to medical issues. But having that type of awareness and education is incredibly important, so that way patients can make truly informed decisions as they go through the process. So, Constance, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to talk with us and to share your story. And to anyone else who is looking for additional guidance and help, please feel free to reach out to Grain Fertility on social media, or you can find me on Instagram at JoeCody5. I'm more than happy to help out in any way to any person who sees this. We're here to be able to empower patients, provide you with additional support through the process, because we know how overwhelming this can be. So again, I really appreciate it. And to anyone else, thank you so much for joining us today. And please have a good day, and let us know how we can help out in any way.
Thank you.
Of course. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.